So this week we're talking about financial crises and the one of the major crises that we went through was um, the variable rate mortgage or mortgage-backed security crisis that we had in 2007 and 2008, and perhaps extended till the 2010. And one of the biggest failures during that time was the Lehman Brothers. So for this week, I wanted to actually bring to your attention the failure of Lehman Brothers, which is not a commercial bank, which was an investment bank. And on Wednesday, I'll talk about the Madoff crisis and the failure of regulation, failure of supervision. And then on Friday, I want to talk about the impact of AIG and if you have time, perhaps to more recently how the the financial crises after um, the Fed interest rates have increased up above the 5%. So Silicon Valley Bank, for instance, is one of those examples, and then we actually have some regional banks who are who seem to be having failed their stress tests. And but anyhow, so we're talking about the Lehman Brothers, and it was a investment bank, so it was not a bank that collected deposits. However, it exposed the financial markets to a significant risk, and that basically created a liquidity crisis and also kind of exacerbated the issues that we had with the mortgage-backed security market. When so Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy in September 15, 2008, and at that time, or at one point in their highest point, their total assets were a little over $600 billion, and their market cap was approximately $70 billion. And for an investment bank, that's a huge amount of um, you know value. And what the when we look at the mortgage-backed security crises, I think that it is estimated to the cost is estimated to the financial market to be in excess of $6 or $7 trillion. So and Lehman Brothers is important in the sense that it is not just a bank failure, but it is also a regulation failure. And one of the comments that the CEO and the chairman of the board back then made was that many other banks were bailed out by the financial regulatory, some of them by Fed, some of them by FDIC, but yet, Lehman Brothers was not bailed out. So it's really interesting, why they were not bailed out, and perhaps the size was rather big, and because it was an investment bank, not a commercial bank, and therefore depositors' money were not at risk, but investors' money were at risk, and that's a different perception. Depositors are usually considered to be, non-risk takers. So investors are usually considered to be risk takers, and therefore, perhaps why, or that's where the government draws the line, and that says we are here to protect the depositors, but not the investors. But for this week, I wanted to provide you with, different videos. One of them is a 60 minutes that basically explains what happened with the bank's failure, which is significantly more than I can actually provide with just with my notes. I do remember the time. It was right around the time that I graduated from my PhD program, and in fact, I was at a conference back then, and one of the guys was sitting next to me, and I've gotten my job at Loyola, and this guy got his job with Lehman Brothers. And while we were at the conference, we heard that Lehman Brothers went under, and it was devastating for him. And many people were in the same situation. So this was a cartoon that I actually took from, I think, Financial Times. And notice how the entire system seems to be collapsing, and I think that refers to the mortgage-backed security crisis, and Lehman Brothers is just sacrificed. Um, I think the main issue with the Lehman Brothers failure was there were a lot of hedge funds who invested in the mortgage-backed securities, and Lehman Brothers just kept on acquiring these mortgage companies or mortgage lenders. And at one point, their portfolio of mortgage-backed securities were a little over $50 billion, and they just kept on lending and lending and lending, and they were making significant profits. But when the subprime mortgages bubbled, that actually started to weaken the financial standing of Lehman Brothers. And I think some of their lendings were in that category, the subprime mortgage category. And even though that they had significantly more assets, that they still needed to justify to their lenders that they were invested in sound mortgage portfolios. And when the subprime mortgages started to fail, their stock price halved in just a few days. And over I think from the beginning of the crisis till the end, the stock price went down about 95%, as far as I remember. And it was, it was not a, it was not a banking crisis per se, but it was more of a bank failing to have or to maintain investor confidence, and therefore losing value of their portfolios, losing the price of their portfolios, and therefore in the sense of an investment bank, once you lose that confidence, then you have significant hard time to raise any more funding for any investments that you plan on doing. So towards the end, I think they issued a preferred stock, and they raised about $5 to $6 billion, which again, for a bank about $600 billion assets, it should be not a problem. But they were only able to raise about $6 billion, and at the time that when they filed for bankruptcy, I think that they actually only had about $1 billion in cash, which is a pathetic place to be. But then again, several banks were bailed out by the financial regulator, but Lehman Brothers was not. So, and then we started seeing these pictures that people who just worked for the bank had to walk away with a box, and which really is heartbreaking because these people only work for this bank, and it's not like they have all this press numbers and as if they are the culprits. And even today, we actually have significant, executives getting hedge fund jobs or portfolio management jobs or wealth management jobs. I think the CEO now owns his own wealth management company, and people still trust their money with him. And but nevertheless, so for this week's content, I have these videos for you. Please do watch them. They are important, and I also have these short articles that I find that to be very helpful. They are important in the sense that it was, again, not just a investment bank failing, but the regulator picking on favorites, if you will, and letting an actual investment bank to go under. A lot of investors lost significant amount of money, and $600 billion of assets, with the stock price go 95% or more down in a matter of a few months. It was, I think, a monumental time in our banking history that exacerbated the entire financial crisis into a systemic problem. And so, in the sense, this I think that made the 2007 and 8 financial crisis to be to last over a decade. So again, today's content is about Lehman Brothers, and on Wednesday I want to talk about the Madoff issue. Um, I want to call it crisis, but and I think in the case of Madoffs, it's another regulatory mishap that lasted over a few decades, and it's incredibly, in my opinion, it's incredibly um, disappointing to see that a Ponzi scheme of that magnitude could last that long and could become that big and could hurt that many people, and yet even afterwards, there's not much of the regulation done to avoid similar situations, and a lot of people who should have been perhaps reviewed are not actually blamed for any part of this met. And I think in the case of Lehman Brothers, the similar applies, and that many people who supposed to be watching the bank to carry this much subprime mortgage portfolio um, and simply just let the bank fail, literally had no blame and no investigation. And for the prior weeks, I actually shared some um, videos by Congress reviewing certain bank mishaps. And with Lehman Brothers, there were a few, but nothing in the tone of any one of those recent banking failures. Perhaps again because Lehman Brothers was an investment bank, and it was more about the investors and not about the deposit holders. So anyhow, thank you for working with me. And if you have any questions, please do let me know. And um, I'll have the Madoff crisis on Wednesday, and then AIG, and I'm also hoping to talk about the more recent banking crises, and the FTS or FTX issue with the cryptocurrencies is also another regulatory failure. So I guess the theme for the week is not just that the banking crises, but also how the regulators are either allowing this to happen, or regulators are at fault to let this happen, or regulators are simply not competent enough to, or the laws are not sufficient enough to maintain markets free of crises. So individual cases, but not the cases themselves, but how the regulators fail to act, I think is the theme for our discussion. So please let me know if you have any questions, and thank you so much for working with me, and hope to see you soon. Thank you. Bye.